Welcome back to season 15. Oh my goodness me. And I feel like I'm bringing a very different energy from the one that ended season 14. And thank you. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to that last episode of season 14. I've had some really beautiful messages about this relationship, the interplay between creativity and grief. And I really appreciate everyone who's written to me. Today, we are also talking about creativity, but from a slightly different angle. This is about creativity and compassion. And I am so delighted to welcome with me the sculptor, ceramicist, artist, Paul Smith. Welcome to the Henny Flynn podcast, the space for deepening self-awareness with profound self-compassion. I'm Henny. I write, coach, and speak about how exploring our inner world can transform how we experience our outer world, all founded on a bedrock of self-love. Settle in and listen and see where the episode takes you. Okay, Paul, so all the technical challenges overcome, and here we are, and it's so lovely to welcome you here, and also it brings back the memory of when I first met you and came to your studio, which we'll talk about in a bit, but just want to welcome you here, really.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Yeah, great. And I wondered if you remembered that moment of when we met in the same way. It's slightly fishing, isn't it? It's like, do you remember me, Paul? But do you remember the story around how I found you? Wasn't sure if you would or not.
It's been a while.
It has been a while.
It was before COVID, wasn't it?
It was before COVID.
Was it something about a creative writing session that you were leading?
Oh, there is something. There definitely was something around the writing. It was I had seen years and years ago, I had seen one of your pieces that I translated as Little Red Riding Hood hugging the wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember feeling so struck by it that at the time I took a photo. And just because there was something so beautiful about the way they were engaged with each other. It was a really big piece in a gallery in Cambridge. And I carried this photo, around in my phone for a long time. And then it reappeared, sometimes sort of your phone will like sort of throw a photograph up to you. And when it reappeared, I looked at it and I suddenly realized the reason why it had resonated so strongly with me. And it was to do with writing, in the sense that it was my journaling had helped me connect with a part of me which I saw as this black dog. And when I saw the picture of this piece that you'd created, I just went, oh my God, it's me. It's the young girl in me hugging this black dog, this part that I'd identified as being my anger. And that's something that I'd always been very frightened of. And so your piece of art helped me see how I'd actually connected these two parts of me, and I was no longer frightened of my anger anymore. And when I shared the picture online, I shared this story, and I had so many messages, Paul, from people, because I just sort of knew that there was this artist, but I didn't know who you were. Shared this picture. I had a message from Belinda Glennon, who's another ceramicist, who said, oh, that's Paul Smith. I love his work. I had a message from Liz, who said, oh, yes, we know Paul from, from around here. And then another friend had one of your pieces, another hugging piece. Yes. And it just felt like a sign. And that is how I came to find you. I tracked you down, Paul.
You'd be surprised how people track me down.
Hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, I've been doing this full time for, well, I'm just doing my accounts today, which is, so this is a great relief from that, for 27 years. So nearly, my 27th year. So um, I've been around for a while. If I try to add up the number of pieces that I've made and sold, really it would be in the many hundreds by now, of all descriptions. So um, yeah, the images are
Yeah.
over the internet. They're there forever, of course. They can never be expunged from the universe.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Yes. Do we ever get rid of anything? That would be that's a whole other podcast episode. So when did your connection with creating these pieces, in fact, will you describe for us like the hugging pieces that I've talked about?
The first few pieces that I made were semi-abstract animals on all fours, just standing, quite simple, very, very plain, mainly British animals, farm animals. Paint what you know, they say, write about what you know. So I thought just start from very simple basics. And then as I was building up different themes, I'd always made human figures at art college, some of them about 3 meters tall, so semi-abstract. So I was always thinking, how do I get the human figure back into the work? So animals were selling. I was enjoying making animals, but I wanted to get the human figure in. So I made a sculpture of a female, nude, and she was in a crouching position, um, with a wolf by her side. Now I sold that. Oh, I don't know, what about 24 years ago, possibly. And I was just looking at it and thinking, oh, I didn't plan it. It just came. So who could that be? Where is that from? And then I thought it might be Red Riding Hood reconciling with the wolf, and that kind of opened the floodgates to this new theme. So if I'd have them hugging, then maybe the wolf is a werewolf, and they can actually have a proper interaction.
Mm.
So then I thought, well, if it's Red Riding Hood, then maybe Goldilocks might be another thing to explore. So the stories, those stories usually end up quite badly. Somebody quite often dies, um, and they're quite dark. So I thought, well, maybe let's bring those elements together in a more sort of harmonious whole. And what you said earlier really interested me, the fact that it's reconciling two parts of yourself, which I kind of tinkered around with in my head, but not in so many words. So that's quite revealing.
Mm.
Um, I always thought of them as a yin and a yang, and usually a male and a female, as two parts of a whole, but not necessarily that.
Mm.
Um,
Well, within us all is the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine.
mm,
We are all
absolutely.
all of it. And I think, I mean, I loved the word that you just used there about reconciling
Mm,
that sense of um um there's something within that word which is also about being at peace or making peace.
mm,
Um and I think for me, certainly the image of the wolf and the young girl hugging really felt like a sense of peacefulness
yeah.
internally. Um, and in fact, when I look across all of your pieces, because I follow you on
Mm,
Instagram, which I'll share the link because I think the way that you write and share about what you create is it's just so lovely. It's so authentic.
Thank you.
But there are so many of the pieces that I look at, and I look at it through the eyes of the sort of therapeutic coach that I am, and I just think, oh gosh, that's very interesting. Which part of me is that resonating with, and which part of the person who says this piece needs to come home with me? What is it resonating with within them?
I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
I think people often it's about a grief process, or remembering people that have gone, or even animals that have gone. It's quite often people have lost a beloved pet, and they associate the wolf or the bear with that creature that's not there anymore. That's quite common.
And it speaks to the different levels, doesn't it? That we can see art, we can see sort of any piece of creativity, and however we see it is valid as well. I think that's really important. And when you think about those hugs, I've got is it Clarissa Smith? Oh gosh, I've got her name wrong, but she writes about women who run with wolves.
Yes.
And this like analysis of the Grimm's fairy tales and the folk tales and what they actually mean in terms of masculinity and femininity. So I think there's something really resonant with what you're saying about that, and the like the reimagining of how the story could be.
Yes.
Things don't have to end in a grisly way.
No, no, certainly not. I mean, there can be joy as well. The dancing figures, I think they express that joy, and freedom, and a letting go and a release. And I enjoy making them. It's just a case of how far can I go with this? How much fun can I make it?
And when you think about the hugs, the hug as in this interaction that happens between these two figures, when you think about that connection that you're creating, what is it that feels really important?
Well, I suppose for me, it's the peace between the protagonists. They've come to terms with their previous differences, so they're unlikely bedfellows, if you like. The wolf or the bear or tiger or whatever it is a big, powerful predator usually. But when I make my sculptures, they always tend to be quite friendly for some reason. And I think that's a manifestation of what's inside of you, isn't it? I mean, it's not, I'm quite cuddly, really. So it's hard to. I'm not an actor, as you said something about me being truthful before. I'm not trying to be something that I'm not. And in my sculptures as well, I'm having fun and just expressing what I'm feeling. And I think they're quite hopeful.
Yeah, I think they are very hopeful. I think there's also, I mean, gosh, without going sort of too deep and it becoming a therapy session, but I mean, there's definitely feels like there's something in there about, you talked about the protagonist is often this kind of male character. And so here we've got this male artist creating these very sort of generous and loving representations of masculinity. And that's, I think that is also, there's something really wonderful about that. And as a as a woman, um, sort of seeing this, like um the equity between the two
Oh yeah.
characters, I think is a really engaging and sort of comforting thing,
Mm.
actually, as well. Maybe, and that obviously hugs in their essence are comforting things.
Yeah, yeah. That's sums it up really. I think I like that.
It's funny as well because when I think about like how hugs that don't feel true, how we know in our system, when someone hugs us
Mm,
and it doesn't feel quite true, the kind of back patty
mm,
or slightly sort of resistant hug, like we know, don't we?
mm,
And just as when we look at a piece of art, I'm sort of thinking about this connection between compassion and
mm.
creativity. Like
Yeah.
we sense when we look at something the truthfulness of it.
Yes, definitely. Actually, you can you can meld the pieces together, the figures together, so that they interlock almost like they're tessellated almost. They can't be separated. They're entwined, um, and that can
Yeah.
make quite um, a gestalt whole um, as a shape, as well as um, as well as a feeling.
Oh, I'd just like to sit with that, a gestalt whole.
But
With a W. Yeah. Yeah, that's oh gosh, because
yeah.
I have a second piece of yours, as you know, um, which for me, and it is two of
Mm.
your two dancing figures. And when I saw it on your feed, and I immediately messaged you and just went, oh, I really think these may need to come and live with me. And there is so basically it's for me
Mm.
it's the dog that's grown up into the wolf, and it's the girl
Mm.
that's grown up into the woman, and they're dancing a tango. I mean, like, honestly, I
Yeah.
will share a picture of this when I share this episode. Oh, it's just so beautiful. But that sort of sense of when you talk about the Gestalt whole,
Mm.
this kind of, so they are a single unit, just as two dancers are a single unit. And yet you have this sense of their
Yeah.
independence and their
Yeah.
separateness as well. And um, yeah, I mean, I look
Good.
at this piece every day sitting on my desk, and it's such a beautiful reminder of
Mm.
how, talking about those parts, of how our relationship with those internal
Mm.
parts can shift and grow. Um, and yeah, I kind of like, I'd be really interested. I know you said
Yes, definitely.
that
Mm.
sparked a thought for you. And is there anything else sort of like going on in your head when you think about that idea of
Parts of
these
me.
being parts, maybe parts of you?
Well, it's it's a hard one to answer, I'm afraid. Um, I don't really think of it in that term, in those terms directly when I'm working. I just go with the flow, as they say, and let people interpret it
Yeah.
afterwards. But there's certainly um, messages and layers of meaning behind each piece, but which isn't necessarily overt, because I don't want to lead people. I want to be able
Mm.
to create something which raises questions and provides a general feeling and a satisfying visual
Mm.
piece, hopefully. Um, so that all those elements have to work together,
Yeah.
or else it fails as a piece of art. I think, for me anyway.
And how does so that
Mm,
you mentioned earlier about grief, that sometimes that's an emotion that you um,
mm,
that the piece is speaking to. And um, one of the things that I've been reflecting on a lot recently is how um, grief can
mm,
impact our creativity, and also how it can be how creativity can be one of our like greatest allies as we
yeah.
move through grief. And wrapped in and around all of that is this
Mm.
concept of compassion and creativity. And I just wonder if that sparks any sort of thoughts for you in terms of either compassion or grief, or
I think
their
my work's
relationship
more
with
about
creativity.
compassion rather than grief, and I think it's directly related to the natural world in the sense that we are um, we're trashing the environment, species are going extinct, and I'd like to help in my own small way foster a closer understanding and relationship with the animal world, especially, um, and protect the animals in the world. We need to protect the environment first of all. Um, so without these keystone animals that like the bears and the wolves and the lynx and the whales, with if we can't protect those, then we can't protect the smaller creatures, and then the plant, the animals, and the fabric of the earth itself. The whole pyramid falls down. So um, I'm trying to
Mm.
do my bit to raise awareness of there should be a compassion towards the natural world as well as our own species.
Mm.
Oh, thank
I think that's really gorgeous. Um, yeah, I really do, and that's so interesting. It sort of sparked a thought for me actually, because so much of
you. Mm,
my work is about the inner world, which we also need to pay attention to. And um, I read something recently about emotional regulation is basic. If everybody can learn emotional regulation, then it will stop being violent towards each other. We'll no longer need to distract ourselves with so many
mm,
um,
yeah.
substances, etc., etc. So, there is something really important about this connection with the inner self and being
Mm,
able to fall in love with the inner self. But then listening to what you're saying about that compassion and the really profound and important extension and
yeah.
extension as in outside of self, into the natural world,
Mm,
and how your pieces speak to that
mm,
is is really, really beautiful. And again, actually, maybe that also sort of turns those hugs around as well, because maybe then it's like the nurturing, nature of the divine feminine, loving the
mm,
natural being, the
mm.
the wolf, the lion, the tiger, um, and nurturing them. Hadn't Do you know what? That's so hilarious, Paul, because I literally hadn't seen it that way. I've been so like centered in on oh my God, this is like my inner self being represented through the art of
Yeah.
sculpture.
This is why I like to leave it open to the
Yes, exactly. Well, and it will still be. I mean, it always. I mean, I think for me,
Mm,
that's the point of connection, and yet it's so lovely to hear that as well. And yeah, and I know you teach others as well, don't you? You teach.
I've only just started doing workshops really, but I I have really enjoyed it. But it's quite new to me. But I've done quite a few demonstrations, um, before, so in the last few years. So I am used to speaking in public a little bit, which is always a great fear of mine in the past. I'd have run away with it, run away from it, but I'm not afraid of it anymore. It's something which
If that part of you,
mm.
if that part of you that was afraid of speaking in public had been an animal, Paul, what animal would it
Oh,
have
crikey.
been?
Oh, a little frightened rabbit.
Oh. And of course, every single person
Yeah,
listening is
exactly.
now
Yeah, little frightened
hugging that
rabbit.
little frightened rabbit.
um, yeah, but I think I'm the expert on my work. So I'm talking from a position of strength if I talk about my own work, and especially when I'm doing a
Mm.
hands-on demonstration, it flows naturally because I've got the physical clay there, the physical being, as well as I'm talking to people one to one as well, so I can see their faces when they're bored.
And what's your sense of what um uh I mean, maybe this is just all sort of part of what we've said before, but I just wondered, is there something specific that you see other artists, other ceramicists who are curious about about the work that you do? Like, what is it that is drawing them?
Oh, well, it's hard to say from my point of view, but I'm guessing because I don't just do the hugs, I make animal sculptures,
Mm.
um, and I still rely on that strength. That's the foundation of all that I do in sculpture. So it's the form is the most important thing. It's the shapes. It's the solidity, the roundness, the weight, um, the the um, the pose of the creature. Um, so that's that is possibly what people see first. They see the almost the silhouette, the shape as a whole, which hopefully burns itself upon their retina and they can never forget it. So I think maybe that's the first thing that brings them in, and then you see the detail of the relationships with the combined figures.
Because I tell
Um,
you what, honestly, there is a quality to the expressions,
mm,
and it's not just the facial expression, it's the physicality of the pieces that you create. That and there's a reason why you've been doing this for 20 odd years,
yeah.
because obviously there's something about it that is really resonant.
Mm,
Um, and I think there is like this really very special quality around um the expression of connection between the figures.
mm.
Um, but I also just wondered, like, does compassion play a part in how you see your own work, if you sort of, or how you like support yourself as you work? Are you compassionate toward yourself?
Not always. I think I think as an artist making a living from my work, it's not always easy. Sometimes you drive yourself a bit too hard, and other times you just go off somewhere else and run away and have a bit of time off, which everybody does, of course.
Mm.
Um, so I try not to. I try to give myself space. I think treating it as a full-time job is the most important thing. So getting up early in the morning, um, doing sort of some Pilates, having some breakfast, going for a walk. That's as much as an important part of the day as making the pieces, because if you're just working all the time, you're not a rounded individual, and I think it would show in the work. It would become stiff and boring. So I have to get out on my bike every now and again.
Mm.
Go and see some friends. But sometimes if I've got a deadline and I've got to do lots of glazing ready for a show, then I'll go in at the weekend. So it I think it does equate to a 9 to 5 5 day a week job, but with strange hours.
Mm.
um,
And also to your point, I mean, if you, I think when we're creating something, whatever that is, whether that's a piece of art, a piece of sculpture, a piece of writing, um, carving, like whatever it might be, um, if we lose sight of ourselves,
mm,
then what gets created can be a little less than, because um I think that's where my, what I was saying earlier about this kind of idea of like creativity being part of what can help us when we move through difficult times as well, because um it it is a form of like enabling ourselves to engage fully in what's happening. And if we lose sight of that, I think, yeah, like you said, was it it could get a bit dry or something like that. I can't remember if
yeah,
it
yeah.
is.
I think it's like anything. If you do anything too much, you lose sight of what it's really about.
Mm,
And I think that's why a lot of people's jobs become boring for them, because it's just taking over too much of their life, and it's not really where they want to be. Um,
mm,
so I, I know that I'm lucky, being able to make a living out of what I do. Um, but it's not all, it's not all sitting around waiting for inspiration and having a nice cup of tea, and there's a lot of thought and sometimes even anguish over things, over technical problems, and you know when a kiln find doesn't work out and everything's cracked,
mm.
that's the time to swear and back
Or
off
that's
the
the
wall.
time to really practice the self-compassion.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's all about balance.
Yeah,
The work is about balance as well, because the balance between the figures, the balance between the emotions, the balance between the forms. So so balance in
yeah,
life and art. It's
that's
what I
nice.
strive for. I don't necessarily always achieve it.
Oh, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a Richard Bach quote, which is, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
he famously said that we teach what we most need to learn.
Ah, okay. That's interesting.
So maybe, hmm, little bit of insight there into
Yeah,
the
get some more back.
Smith.
Yeah.
But also I think to your point, it's an ongoing practice, isn't it? It's not losing sight of the fact that um even if we love doing something, it's really important that we also create space for the other things in our life.
Yeah.
Just as, actually, I'd say, if we're doing something which we don't really love, then finding space for things that we do really love
Mm.
can rebalance, where we're at, and maybe help us see other things that we can make changes with. So yeah, balance. That feels like a good point to reach in our conversation, actually. Um, I there's a well, one last question, I suppose. Just to, is there anything that you would um say to someone who's listening, who perhaps is feeling a kind of pull to creativity, but maybe has got a limiting belief that they're not creative, or doesn't quite know like where to begin, or I don't know, something limits them. Is there anything that you would say to those people?
um, just enjoy it. If they feel drawn towards that mode of expression, then just enjoy it. And I always think of the work of David Shrigley as an artist. His work looks quite childlike in the sense of his drawing, but it's obviously deliberately like that. And it's very, very clever. So it's not all about technical ability. It's about sort of bringing something up from inside. It isn't about showing off. It isn't about making somebody impressed with how good you are at something. It's telling story, and being true, and having fun. So get those pens and pencils out and scribble away and see what happens. Get that bit of clay, and just let it happen.
I love that. I love that. I think that point around it's not about impressing somebody,
Hmm.
because often the person that we're thinking about impressing would be our art teacher from when we were 8, or
Mm,
a grandparent or a parent from when we were younger.
mm.
Um, or we have that comparisonitis and go, so and so so much better than me.
Mm,
And I remember when I was at a party a few years ago, and uh, of an artist who has since become a friend was standing with me and a very, very old friend of mine. And this artist said, turned to me and said, "So, are you a creative?"
mhm.
And I said, well, I kind of, and then my friend just burst out laughing and just went, "Oh my God, Henny, you're really creative." And I said, "Am I?" And she said, "Oh my God, just think about all the fads you've had over the years." And it was actually that moment that made me release that
Mm,
thought, because I think because I was sort of asked if I was a creative,
mm,
that it was like, oh, suddenly that's got meaning and connotations and
mm,
layer, it's heavy. Whereas actually, are you creative?
mm.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the most fundamental um kind of human qualities and traits, and
Mm.
so often it gets lost actually.
Yes. Because we're told that we're good enough. Um, but creativity can take many forms. So it might be dance, it might be music, it might be skiing, it might be all sorts of things.
Rock climbing might be,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
anything
yeah.
at all.
They can be very creative and
Yeah.
expressive. Yeah, so don't limit yourself.
No, exactly. And actually there comes the compassion, doesn't it? It's like hold
Mm,
those beliefs very,
mm,
very tenderly, and let yourself play.
that's it.
Yeah.
Play.
Play. Yeah, that's it. Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, Paul. And it's a question that I often ask my clients, and I ask my guests on the show as well. So, if this time of your life was a chapter in your book of life, what would the chapter heading be?
Oh, uh, okay. Um, a chance to go for it,
Oh,
because I have built up a certain, um, I don't want to call it a reputation, but certain um, career, if you like. I'm not sure it's a
yes, we're
career,
allowed.
but
We're allowed to say these words.
people know about me,
Yeah, they do.
and they know about my work, and so I'm in a privileged position where I could change things. So I think I'm going to be working over the winter on some new work and
Mm.
see where that leads me.
Oh, gorgeous. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I felt the coming back to the truthfulness and the I was kind of aware as I asked it, it was like, oh, is this a bit big? But I love that. Yes. And so go for it.
Yeah, yeah. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, brilliant. There are all these hugs around you, Paul.
Mhm.
See, each one of these fierce animals that you create are also powerful figures.
All right. Thanks for that. Thanks for that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward. I'm going to share pictures once I send this live of my two pieces, and
Great.
I'm sure people love the stories behind them.
That's brilliant.
Okay.
It's been fun.
Yeah, really has.
Thanks, Annie.